I did not marry for love. I married to stop a storm I could not fight. The judge asked if I said I do, and I said it with a dry mouth and wet eyes. The stranger beside me did not hold my hand. His name was Adrian Hale. He was calm like winter, strong like a wall, and dangerous like silence. I said yes to him to save my mother's life and my brother's future. I was a bride, but inside I felt like a soldier signing a peace I did not choose. When we left the courthouse, the rain started to fall, and I knew my real test had just begun. He gave me an umbrella, but he did not step close. The transfer is done, he said, as if my heart were a bank. In my phone, a message from the hospital. Payment received. My mother could get her surgery. Another message from a number I feared. Debt cleared. My brother was safe from men who smile with knives in their pockets. My legs shook. I wanted to say thank you, but the word was too small for the price. Adrian opened the car door for me. His eyes were kind and tired, and that tiredness scared me more than anger. I sat inside, and the door closed like the end of one life and the start of another. Adrian drove with both hands, steady and quiet. The city slid by like a secret. I watched the world I knew fade in the mirror, the small bakery, the bus stop, the gray building with the cracked wall. My phone buzzed again. "We're okay, Phil," my mother's voice in a short message that felt like a hug. I held back tears because I did not want to cry in front of him. He asked if I wanted music. I said no, and he turned off the radio without a word. The car felt like a church where we could not pray. I wondered what he wanted from me, if kindness always hides a price, and my breath grew thin. We reached his apartment. It was high, white, and quiet like a museum. The glass walls showed the whole city, small and far, like a game I could not play anymore. He pointed to a room. "It's yours," he said. A new suitcase waited there, still with tags. Clothes in my size hung in the closet, simple and elegant. Not mine, but not ugly. I touched a dress and felt the cost of it in my fingertips. Adrian stood at the door, respectful, distant, almost shy. "If you need anything, there's a list with numbers on the desk," he added, as if we were colleagues at work, not two people who had just bound two lives. My mouth formed a thank you I could not say out loud. At night, I could not sleep. I heard the city breathe through the glass. I thought of my mother's laugh, soft and warm, and my brother's silly jokes that always made me smile. Then I saw my father's face in my mind, the day he left, a debt in his eyes he never learned to pay. I told myself I was strong, that I chose this, that love is not always sweet, and sometimes love looks like a signed paper. In the dark, I heard Adrian moving in the kitchen. A cup touched the counter, the soft ring of ceramic on stone. Part of me wanted to join him, part of me wanted to run. I stayed still and tried to become air. Morning came with a soft gray light. I stepped out and found a note on the table. "Breakfast in the fridge. I'll be back by noon. A." The A looked like a wall built with ink. In the fridge there were berries, yogurt, toast, and a small jar of honey with a ribbon. I smiled without wanting to. I ate slowly, like I could eat the fear inside me with the food. I washed the plate and left it to dry, because small orders help when big things fall apart. The apartment smelled like coffee and rain. I walked to the window and pressed my hand to the glass. The city was so near, and yet I was far from the girl I was yesterday. Around noon, he came back with a paper bag from a bookstore. "You can read here if you like quiet places," he said. Inside the bag were simple stories with hopeful ends, the kind my mother loves. I asked, "Why did you choose me?" The question jumped out before I could stop it. He looked at me for a long second, as if he were choosing a safe answer. "Because you were brave," he said. "And because I needed someone who would not ask me to be something I am not." His voice was low and rough, like a road with stones. I felt the floor shift under my feet. Brave? I felt like glass. We walked through the rooms, and he showed me the small things that make a life, where he keeps the keys, the extra towels, the place where the heater clicks. His world was clean and careful, like he was afraid of chaos. On a shelf, a photo of a woman and a man stood in a simple frame. They looked proud and sad at the same time. "Your parents?" I asked. He nodded. He did not explain. I did not ask more. I learned that silence is sometimes an act of care. But my heart wanted to know what broke him, and why I could feel his hurt like a cold wind under a closed door. That evening I cooked pasta, the way my mother taught me, simple and warm. I wanted to give something back that was not money or thanks or nerves. We ate at the kitchen counter, not at the large dining table that looked like a stage. The sauce was a bit salty. I said sorry. He smiled a little, the first small sun between two long clouds. It's good, he said. I saw a man who worked hard to stay steady, and I wondered what would happen if he let himself fall even one step. When the plates were clean, he said, I have a rule, we do not lie. My hand froze around the glass of water. I had a lie in my pocket already. He asked about my family. I told him the truth, about my mother's heart, about hospital bills, about men who knock on doors at night with soft voices and hard hands. I told him about my brother's mistake and my father's debts that never stopped multiplying. I told him about the morning the doctor looked at me and said, there is a way, but it's expensive. I did not tell him that I had a love once, a boy with paint on his hands who dreamed of small houses and orange trees. I did not tell him that love was a picture I hid in my pillowcase. My throat burned with the things I kept for myself. Adrian nodded and listened with care, like a good doctor. You did the right thing, he said. Sometimes we choose pain to stop a bigger pain. His words were a blanket I did not expect. And you? I asked. Why this arrangement? Why me? He looked past me, through the glass, to the city that never looked back. I needed a wife, he said simply, but his eyes said more. He mentioned meetings, old promises, a partnership that demanded an image, a steadiness on paper to calm sharks in suits. He did not say the word lonely, but I heard it in the space between needed and wife. I wanted to offer comfort, and yet I was still learning how to breathe beside him. Days grew into a shape. I woke early, checked on my mother by phone, laughed with my brother when he tried to fix the sink by watching videos, and learned the rhythm of the apartment, the click of lights at dusk, the hum of the elevator, the soft sound of Adrian removing his watch after work. He was careful with me, like I was a bird that might fly away if he moved too fast. We spoke about small things, weather, coffee, music, but each small thing felt like a thin bridge over deep water. At night, I wrote in a notebook I hid in the dresser, "You married a stranger to save your family. Do not forget why you're here." And then under it, I wrote what I could not say. But he is not a monster. One Friday, we went to see my mother at the hospital. He wore a dark sweater instead of a suit, and he looked softer somehow. My mother held his hand longer than expected and called him Genro with a shy smile. He bought her a silk scarf with tiny blue flowers that matched her eyes. "For luck," he said, and I watched her cheeks turn warm like tea. When we left, my mother whispered to me, "He carries a heavy thing." I asked what she saw. She said, "A good man who is afraid to be loved." The elevator door closed on the smell of disinfectant and hope. My heart beat faster, and I did not know if it was fear or something else. That night, we found a box in the hall when we returned. No name, no ribbon. Inside lay a photo of Adrian as a child, torn in half and taped back together, and a note with 3 words, "You owe me." My chest turned to ice. Adrian's face changed in a way I had not seen before, closed, alert. A door slammed inside his eyes. He took the note and the photo and said we were safe, but his voice held a tremor. He locked the door twice and checked the windows once, like a ritual he knew by heart. I wanted to ask 100 questions. I asked none because I understood that this was a story that might cut me if I touched it wrong. Sleep did not come. I stood by the window, counting the red lights of cars down below. Adrian came to the kitchen and poured water. "Do you trust me?" he asked, eyes on the glass, not on me. The question felt too big for the room. "I am trying," I said. It was the most honest thing I could give. He nodded, but the nod was heavy. "I will handle it," he said. "It's old. It will not touch you." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to place my fear in his hands and watch it turn small. But the note sat between us, ugly and loud, and I knew old debts do not sleep for long. The next morning, he left early for a meeting in a part of the city that smells like money. I cleaned the kitchen and put fresh flowers in a glass. The doorbell rang once, soft and fast, like a secret. I opened the door to a woman with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She knew my name, and she knew the color of the dress I wore at the courthouse. "Tell him," she said, "that the past is not done." Then she slipped a small envelope into my hand and walked away, her perfume floating like a warning. Inside the envelope was a wedding photo, ours printed on cheap paper with a red X over my face. A chill ran down my back like a slow drop of rain. I waited for Adrian with the envelope in my pocket, unsure if I should show it or protect him from it, as if that were possible. When he came home, he was pale under his tan, like a man who ran from a shadow. I put the envelope on the table between us. He did not act surprised. He sat down and rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought I could stop this from touching you." He took a breath and finally met my eyes. "There is something I need to tell you." My heart pounded against my ribs like a fist on a locked door, and I understood that the real marriage was starting now, with the truth I did not yet know. He leaned back in the chair, his fingers tracing the rim of the glass, eyes distant like he was watching a movie of his own mistakes. "Before you think I'm someone good, you should know," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "The man who sent that photo, the one who wrote 'You owe me,' used to be my best friend." The room shrank around his words. We built a company together. We dreamed big, made money fast, and broke every rule that love and loyalty ever wrote. I trusted him with everything. Then one deal went wrong, and people got hurt. I walked away. He didn't, and when I did, he lost everything. He looked at me, but I could see he wasn't really seeing me. He was trapped in a memory. He wanted revenge, Adrian continued. Not with guns, with shame. He waited years. Then he found a way through me, through this marriage, through you. My breath caught. "Through me?" I whispered. He nodded once, slow and heavy. He knew I'd never let anyone touch the people under my roof. He knew I'd protect you. "So now you're a target in a game you never agreed to play." My hands trembled. I didn't know if I was angry, scared, or both. The stranger I married had just turned into a man fighting ghosts with my name on them. "I can end this," he said, standing. "But it means going back to a place I swore I'd never see again." His hand brushed his temple as if he could erase the past by touch. "Then don't go," I said without thinking. "We'll figure it out another way." He turned to me with a tired smile. "You say we, but I'm the reason this started." I stepped closer. "Then let me be part of the reason it ends." The silence that followed was thick with something I couldn't name, maybe trust, maybe fear, maybe the beginning of both. The next morning, I woke up to an empty apartment. The note on the table said only one thing: "Don't wait up." I tried calling him, but the line went straight to voicemail. I cleaned, I read, I waited. The sky grew darker, and the city lights blurred behind rain. Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. A photo appeared. Adrian, standing by a car, his shirt torn, blood on his temple. The caption read, "Still think he can save you?" My heart stopped. My knees gave in. I dialed the police, but I couldn't explain what to say. My husband, the man I barely know, might be dying for me. Hours felt like years. The rain wouldn't stop. I walked to the window, watching my reflection tremble. And then I heard its keys turning in the lock. I ran to the door, and there he was, soaked, pale, but alive. I threw my arms around him before I could think. He didn't hug me back at first, then his hands found my back, trembling like mine. "It's over," he whispered. "He won't bother us again." I wanted to believe him. But there was something in his voice that said the story wasn't over, it had only changed chapters. He sat on the couch, breathing slow. I brought him a towel, and when our eyes met, there was no distance left between us. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why protect me when you could just walk away?" His answer was quiet. "Because you remind me of who I used to be before I ruined everything." My throat closed. I wanted to say something, but no words could carry the weight between us. So I just sat beside him, listening to the rain, our silence heavy but no longer cold. Days passed. The city kept moving, pretending nothing happened. But in our apartment, something had changed. We spoke more. He told me small stories, how he once wanted to be a teacher, how his father taught him to fix watches, how he learned that silence could be armor. I told him about the bakery where I worked, about my mother's favorite songs, about how I used to believe love should be easy. And slowly, the walls began to melt. I caught myself waiting for his footsteps, listening for his voice, and that scared me more than anything, because love was not part of our deal. One evening, he came home with a bruise on his jaw and a small smile. "Old ghosts don't vanish fast," he said, pouring coffee like nothing happened. I reached for the cup, our fingers brushed, and the air between us changed. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. Something in his eyes softened, and for a moment, I forgot why we were here, how this started, and who we were supposed to be. Then his phone rang, loud, breaking the spell. He answered quickly, stepped aside, and when he came back, his face was different again, cold, unreadable, like a door slammed shut. "We need to leave town for a few days," he said. "It's safer." We drove through the night. The road wound through dark hills, headlights carving silver lines through the rain. I watched him drive, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on something far away. "Adrian," I said softly, "are you scared?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, "Yes, not of them. Of losing what I didn't expect to find." He looked at me, and my heart forgot how to beat for a second. I wanted to ask, "What did you find?" But I already knew. The car moved on, the rain whispered against the glass, and I realized I wasn't just a wife by paper anymore. I was part of a story that could break me, or save us both. We stopped at a small house by a lake, quiet and hidden by trees. The air smelled of pine and still water. Inside there was a fire already waiting, as if someone had been there before us. "A friend," he said when I asked. "Someone who owes me peace." We sat by the fire, and he finally looked tired enough to fall apart. I touched his hand just lightly, and he didn't move away. "You don't have to carry it alone," I said. He looked at me like I'd said something dangerous. "If I let you close, you'll see everything," he said. "Maybe that's what I want," I whispered. The fire cracked between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "If I tell you the rest, you might hate me." I leaned closer. "Try me." He sighed, eyes on the flames. "The deal that went wrong, it wasn't just business. It was with your father." The words sliced the air. I froze. "My father?" He nodded slowly. "He owed money to us. When he couldn't pay, I protected him. But the man I worked with wanted punishment. I stopped it. I thought I was doing good. He called it betrayal, so he went after your family instead. Everything that happened to you began because I tried to save your father years ago." The fire hissed. My world tilted. I saw flashes, my father's desperate eyes, the debts, the fear. "You knew this?" I whispered. "You knew who I was?" Adrian looked at me, pain raw in his face. "I found out the day before the wedding. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid you'd walk away, and your mother needed the surgery. I thought I could make it right by giving you everything I took." My hands trembled. "You tried to fix what you broke," I said, tears rising. "But you broke something else in the process." He didn't deny it. He just said, softly, "I know." I turned away, but he followed. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "Then why does it hurt so much?" I asked. He reached for me, then stopped mid-air, his fingers shaking. "Because it's real now," he said, "and real things hurt." The firelight painted his face gold and sad. I looked at him, the stranger I married to save my family, and for the first time, I saw the man who had saved us long before I even knew his name. My tears fell without sound. He brushed one from my cheek, his touch fragile, and whispered, "If I could go back, I'd do it differently." I believed him, but belief didn't erase the pain, it only made it deeper. That night, I couldn't sleep. I watched him by the window, his face in shadows, guilt sitting beside him like an old friend. And in that silence, I realized something both beautiful and cruel. Love doesn't always start with trust. It sometimes starts with forgiveness. I didn't know if we could heal, if the truth would save us or destroy us, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to run anymore. I whispered Adrian, and when he turned, our eyes met, not as strangers, not as saviors, but as two broken souls trying to remember what it means to feel alive. The fire was almost out when morning came. I woke to the sound of birds and the smell of smoke fading into dawn. Adrian was still by the window, the same place he'd been when I closed my eyes. His face was pale, eyes hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in years. "You should rest," I whispered. He didn't move. "Rest feels like a luxury I don't deserve," he said. I stood behind him, the floor cold under my feet. "You saved my mother," I said quietly. "Maybe that's enough." He turned, the first light of the sun brushing his jaw. "Saving one life doesn't erase the ones I ruined." I wanted to argue, to tell him redemption doesn't come all at once, but the words got lost in my throat. Instead, I made coffee. The silence between us was heavy but alive, like two people standing at the edge of something fragile. When I handed him the cup, our fingers touched, and the warmth of his skin made my chest ache. "Thank you," he murmured, and I realized how rare those words sounded from him, like each one cost him something to say. We sat on the floor beside the dying fire, not talking, not needing to. Later that day we walked by the lake. The air was soft, the water calm, the sky a quiet gray. He told me he used to come there with his father as a boy. He said water remembers, Adrian said, skipping a stone. That everything we say near it stays somewhere beneath the surface. I smiled faintly. Then I hope the lake forgets some of my words. He looked at me. "No, even the bad ones belong to you, and that makes them worth keeping." My heart twisted. He was still broken, but he spoke like a man trying to build something again, one fragile truth at a time. That night, I found him fixing an old watch by the table. The sound of tiny gears turning filled the room. "It was my father's," he said. "Stopped the day he died. I've tried to bring it back to life ever since." I watched his hands steady, patient, gentle in a way that didn't fit the man I'd met at the courthouse. "Maybe some things aren't meant to tick again," I said softly. He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Maybe not, but trying keeps me human." I didn't know if he was talking about the watch or himself. We stayed at the lake house for days. The world outside felt far away, like another lifetime. I cooked, he read, sometimes we just sat in silence. One afternoon, I fell asleep on the couch, and when I awoke, a blanket covered me. He'd written a note on a napkin, "You looked peaceful. Didn't want to wake you." It was such a small thing, but my chest felt full. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Maybe love doesn't need an invitation. Maybe it just arrives when everything else is gone. But peace is a visitor, never a resident." Psst. One evening, as the sky turned violet, a car parked down the dirt road. Adrian's body tensed before I even noticed. "Stay here," he said, his voice sharp again, the softness gone. I watched from the window as he stepped outside. A man in a dark coat stood by the car, talking fast, his gestures sharp. Adrian didn't shout, but his stillness was louder than any noise. Then the man handed him an envelope and drove off. When Adrian came back in, his eyes were distant again. "We need to go back tomorrow," he said simply. "It's over." On the drive back to the city, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't angry, it was tired, full of words we both feared to say. The skyline appeared, tall and indifferent, like it didn't care what we had been through. I wanted to ask him what was inside that envelope, but something in his expression told me it wasn't time. When we reached the apartment, he went straight to his office. The door closed, and I heard the sound of paper tearing. Hours later, he came to the kitchen. His eyes looked softer, but sad. "He's gone," he said. "Left the country. No more threats, no more games." Relief should have felt sweet, but it didn't. Because when something ends, something else always begins. He reached for a glass of water, but his hand brushed mine, and this time neither of us looked away. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, fragile, real. His lips parted as if to speak, but he didn't. He just stayed there, close enough for me to feel his breath. Days became lighter. My mother recovered. My brother started a new job. The shadows that haunted us began to fade. Yet inside our home, a different kind of tension grew, a quiet ache that followed every glance, every touch that lingered too long. One morning, as I was making breakfast, he came behind me, his voice low. "You don't have to stay anymore," he said. "The debt's gone. You're free." My hands froze over the stove. Is that what you want? I asked. He hesitated. What I want doesn't matter. I turned to face him. Then what does? He looked at me for a long moment, then said, You deserve a life that isn't built on someone else's mistakes. My throat tightened. But what if that life is here? His jaw clenched. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tiny scar under his eye, the one I'd never asked about. You're not supposed to make this harder, he said quietly. Too late, I whispered. Before either of us could think, I kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, almost hesitant, like both of us were afraid to be the first to believe it was real. Then his hands found my face, pulling me closer, the years of pain and silence breaking in a single breath. When we finally parted, his forehead rested against mine. You shouldn't have done that, he said, his voice shaking. Why? I asked. It's because now I can't let you go. The days that followed were the kind that make you forget time. We didn't talk about what we were anymore, we just existed in small moments, shared coffee, late-night laughter, the comfort of knowing someone is breathing beside you. But love built on pain is fragile. Every time his phone rang, I saw fear flash in his eyes. Every time I reached for him, I felt the distance he was trying not to keep. I knew he loved me. I also knew he didn't believe he deserved to. One night I woke up to find him gone. The apartment door was open, the air cold. On the counter, a letter waited under my name. My hands shook as I unfolded it. I thought I could fix the past, but I can't. You gave me peace I didn't earn. Don't wait for me. Live. My knees gave out. The paper slipped from my fingers. The city outside kept moving, but inside everything stopped. I called his phone again and again, but it went straight to silence. Days passed with no word. My mother asked, Where is he? And I could only say, he needed time. I went back to the bakery, tried to smile, tried to breathe, but every sound, every smell reminded me of him. The man who was once a stranger, who became my husband, and then something I could not name. I told myself he'd come back when he was ready. But deep down I knew some goodbyes don't make noise, they just fade into quiet. And yet, one night, as I was closing the window, I saw it, a shadow on the street, standing still, looking up. It was him. Older somehow, worn but alive. He didn't call out, didn't move. He just looked at me, and even from that distance I could feel it, the same question burning between us since the day we met. Can love survive what broke it? For a moment I thought it was just another dream, one of those cruel ones that look too real before they fade. But he didn't fade. He stood there in the rain, his coat soaked, his eyes locked on mine from the street below. My breath caught in my throat. I opened the window and the cold air rushed in. Adrian, I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. He didn't move. He just looked up, the way a man does when he's asking for forgiveness without words. I ran down the stairs barefoot, heart pounding like it wanted to break free from my chest. When I stepped outside, the rain hit me like 1,000 tiny memories. He was still there, standing under the dim light of the street lamp. For a long second, we just stared at each other. Then he said softly, I shouldn't have come back. My voice trembled. Then why did you? He hesitated, eyes glistening with the kind of pain you can't hide. Because leaving didn't make me forget. It made me remember everything I wanted to lose. The tears I'd buried for weeks finally broke free. You left me with silence, I said. And still, I waited for the sound of your footsteps. He reached out as if to touch me, then stopped mid-air, his hand hovering between guilt and need. I thought I was saving you from me, he said. But every day without you felt like punishment. I took a shaky breath. Then stay, I whispered. He shook his head. You don't know what I've done since I left. My heart dropped. Then tell me, I said. Let me carry it too. But he only said not tonight. Please. His voice broke, and I saw the man who had built walls for years now standing without a single one left. I took his hand. It was cold, trembling. I pulled him inside, closed the door, and for the first time since he'd gone, the apartment felt like home again. I made tea while he sat on the couch, dripping water on the floor. Neither of us spoke. The silence was no longer sharp. It was fragile, like glass between us. When I handed him the cup, his fingers brushed mine so gently it hurt. You still drink chamomile, he murmured, half smiling. You still forget sugar, I answered, smiling through tears. And for a moment the world was simple again. He stayed that night. I didn't ask questions. I just let him sleep on the couch, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Every sound reminded me he was real. In the morning I found him in the kitchen making pancakes. The smell of butter and coffee filled the air, warm and almost normal. I don't remember the last time I made breakfast for someone, he said quietly. Then don't forget this one, I replied. He smiled, a real one this time, small, tired, but alive. As days passed, he stayed. The apartment began to heal around us, one laugh, one shared silence at a time. He started fixing things: shelves, the broken lamp, the window latch that always stuck. It was as if he was trying to repair more than just the furniture. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with that same quiet intensity, as if he couldn't decide whether to reach out or apologize again. And sometimes he did neither. He'd just say, "You make this place feel like it's worth staying in." But peace never stays long in borrowed time. One evening, he came home later than usual, his face tense, his hands shaking. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach turned cold. He pulled a small folder from his jacket and placed it on the table. Inside were photos, of me, of my family, of him. Some were taken recently. "They found us," he said. The man who left, he wasn't alone. My heart pounded. I thought it was over. He shook his head. So did I, but he had partners. People who don't forget debts. Fear crept back into my bones. "What do we do now?" I asked. He looked at me, eyes full of storms. "We run." I blinked. "Again?" He nodded. "This time, far away. Somewhere they can't reach us." I wanted to argue, to say that running never ends, but the look in his eyes silenced me. He was protecting me again, and part of me hated that I needed it. "I'll go with you," I said. "No questions, no fear." He stepped closer, his voice rough. "You'd leave everything behind for me?" "I already did once," I said. "This time, I choose it." We packed what we could fit into 2 bags, clothes, documents, a few photos. He grabbed the old watch he'd tried to fix, still silent but whole, and placed it in his pocket. "For luck," he said. When we left, the city was asleep. The streets were empty, except for the echo of our footsteps. We didn't look back. At the airport, he bought 2 tickets under different names. "No one follows ghosts," he said with a faint smirk. I almost smiled, but fear sat behind my ribs like a second heartbeat. On the plane, I looked at him as the clouds swallowed the ground below. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere with quiet," he replied. "You'll like it." His hand found mine under the blanket, and I didn't pull away. I rested my head on his shoulder, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreams. When I awoke, he was still there, watching me with an expression I couldn't name, something between hope and heartbreak. When we landed, the world was different. Warmer, brighter, slower. He rented a small house near the sea, a place that smelled like salt in beginnings. "We'll stay here for a while," he said. "Just us." I nodded, but part of me knew the past doesn't lose its way that easily. Still, when he held me that night, I let myself believe, even if it was only for a moment, that the storm was finally over. The sea became our silence. Mornings filled with the sound of waves, evenings with stories that we both half made up to forget the real ones. We walked barefoot on the sand, laughed about things that didn't matter, and pretended the world outside didn't exist. He began to draw again, sketches of the shore, of me, of light on water. "You're getting better," I told him once. He smiled. "That's what love does, it teaches your hands to be gentle again." But even paradise trembles when truth knocks. One afternoon, as we returned from the market, a car waited by the gate. A man stepped out, wearing the kind of suit that doesn't belong near sand. "Mr. Hale?" he said coldly. "It's time you stopped running." Adrian froze. My heart sank. "Who are you?" I asked. The man looked at me with a strange mix of pity and calculation. "The consequence," he said simply, and handed Adrian an envelope sealed in black. Adrian didn't open it there. He just held it, his knuckles white. That night, he sat by the sea alone, the envelope beside him. I watched from the doorway, unable to move. The moonlight turned his face to silver and sorrow. When I finally stepped closer, he said, without looking at me, "There's a price for every piece we steal." My throat ached. "Then we'll pay it together," I said. He shook his head slowly. "You've paid enough already." His eyes lifted to mine, full of love and despair. "Promise me something," he whispered. "If I don't come back, don't wait this time." I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. "Don't say that," I begged. He stood, brushed his fingers along my cheek, and said the words that broke me. "You were never part of my punishment. You were my redemption." And before I could hold him, he walked into the dark, the sound of the waves swallowing his steps. When I woke up, the side of the bed where he had slept was cold. The sound of the sea filled the silence he left behind. On the table, there was only a note, written in his careful handwriting. "Forgive me for keeping you safe the only way I know, by staying away." I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. The air tasted like salt and loss. For a moment, I believed he might walk back through the door. But the wind came instead, whispering through the curtains, carrying his name like a ghost that didn't know where to rest. The days that followed felt endless. I still cooked for two, still set his cup on the table, still looked at the horizon as if the sea might bring him back. The neighbors must have thought I was a widow. Maybe in some way I was. He wasn't dead, but he was gone, and sometimes that's worse. Death gives closure. Absence only gives questions. I tried to write to him, but every letter ended with the same sentence. "Come home, please. I never sent them." They sat in a drawer, folded like prayers that never reached heaven. Weeks passed. The world around me softened as if it was trying to teach me to breathe again. I found work at a small cafe near the pier. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, didn't ask about my past. She just handed me an apron and said, "Everyone needs a beginning, even the broken ones." I smiled for the first time in weeks. The smell of coffee, the sound of laughter, the chatter of tourists, it all reminded me that life continues, whether we're ready or not. At night, I still dreamed of him. Sometimes he was standing in the rain, reaching for me. Other times he was silent, watching from a distance, fading each time I blinked. I began to talk to him in whispers, telling him about the people at the cafe, about my mother's letters, about the sunsets that looked like bruised hearts. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was survival. One afternoon, as I was wiping tables, a man came in. Tall, in a light suit, polite smile. "You're new here," he said. I nodded, "Just helping out." He ordered coffee, black, and watched the sea through the window. "Do you live nearby?" he asked casually. I hesitated. "Yes. Why?" He smiled thinly. "Curious, that's all." "You remind me of someone." My stomach turned cold. When I brought his change, he said, "Tell Adrian Hale that not all debts stay buried." My hand froze. "I don't know who that is," I lied. He smiled again, the kind that sees through everything. "Of course you don't," he said, and left. That night, I sat on the porch, the stars sharp and silent above me. Fear crept back like an old friend. If they had found me, they could find him too. I thought about running again, but where could I go that the past wouldn't follow? My hands shook as I opened the drawer and looked at all the letters I never sent. I took the last one, tore it open, and wrote one more line at the bottom. "They're still looking. Please be careful." I didn't know where to send it, so I walked to the edge of the shore and let the wind take it. Maybe the sea would remember, like he once said. Days turned into months. Life built itself again, piece by piece. My mother's voice on the phone brought warmth. My brother sent photos of his new home, his smile wide and real. But no message ever came from Adrian. Still, I couldn't stop waiting. I would hear footsteps outside and my heart would jump. I'd see a stranger in a crowd and think it was him. I started to wonder if love was meant to haunt us more than heal us. One morning, I went to the market early. The air smelled of oranges and rain. I was carrying a basket when someone brushed past me. "Sorry," a man said. His voice, it froze me. I turned, and for a moment, I thought I was dreaming again. It was him, Adrian. Thinner, older, with lines that hadn't been there before, but it was him. I dropped the basket. The oranges rolled across the street. "You're alive," I whispered. His eyes softened. I told you not to wait. Tears blurred everything. And I told you I would. He looked around, cautious. We can't talk here, he said. Please come with me. I followed him down a narrow street to a small park by the sea. He sat on a bench, his hands trembling slightly. I didn't want to drag you back into this, he said. But they won't stop. They want something only I can give, and they think I'll trade it for you. My breath caught. What do they want? He looked out at the water. Proof. Of everything we did. Years ago. Documents that could destroy them. And me. My hands clenched. Then give it to them. He shook his head. If I do, more people get hurt. This isn't about money anymore, it's about revenge. I sat beside him, my heart racing. Then what are you going to do? He turned to me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Protect you, he said. Even if it's the last thing I do. Before I could answer, a sound cut through the quiet, the sharp click of a camera. I turned. The man from the cafe stood by a lamppost, holding a phone, snapping pictures. Adrian's face went pale. Go, he said. Now. No, I grabbed his arm. Not this time. But he pulled free. If they follow you, I lose my only advantage. Please. His voice cracked. I hesitated, then ran as he shouted my name. When I looked back once more, he was gone. The man with the phone, too. The park was empty, but the sound of the waves felt different now, like they were warning me. That night, I waited by the window again, just like before. Hours passed. The sea kept whispering his name, and my heart kept answering. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, but I knew one thing with painful clarity. Whatever love was, whatever shape it took, it wasn't finished with us yet. By morning, I couldn't sit still anymore. The fear that once kept me hiding was gone, replaced by something fiercer, the need to find him. Love, I realized, wasn't about waiting. It was about walking into the storm and hoping he'd still be there on the other side. I packed a small bag, locked the door of the little house by the sea, and left before the sun climbed over the horizon. The world felt quiet, too quiet, as if it knew something was coming. At the cafe, the owner looked at me with concern. You're leaving? She asked. I nodded. There's someone I have to find. She smiled sadly. Then find him. But don't lose yourself along the way. Her words stayed with me as I boarded the early bus to the city. Every mile between us felt like years, every sound of the wheels against the road like a heartbeat calling his name. I went to the last place I'd seen him, the park by the sea. It was empty now, only the ghosts of our voices left behind. On the bench where we sat, there was something taped under the wood. A folded note, sealed in plastic, with my name written on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. If you're reading this, I didn't want you to come, but I knew you would. Go to the old docks at sunset, you'll find what you need to know. I just went. The docks were quiet, the air thick with salt and rust. Ships moored in silence, ropes creaking with the tide. I hid behind a stack of wooden crates as a black car pulled up. 2 men got out, suits pressed sharp as knives. Then Adrian stepped into view. My breath caught. He looked calm, too calm. The kind of calm that means you've already said goodbye in your mind. One of the men handed him a briefcase. Another opened a folder showing papers I couldn't see. Where is she? One of them asked. Adrian's voice was low, steady. Gone. Like you wanted. The man smirked. You think we believe that? You've lied before. Adrian didn't answer. His silence was defiance enough. The man took a step closer. You know the rule, Hale. No loose ends. And then, I saw the gun. The sound that followed split the air, sharp and final. I screamed his name before I even knew I was moving. The men turned, startled, but I was already running. Adrian stumbled, his shoulder red, his breath heavy. I reached him as the car sped away, tires screeching against wet concrete. You shouldn't be here, he whispered, his voice cracking. You told me not to wait, I said, tears streaming. So I came instead. He tried to laugh, but it turned into a groan. You never listen. I pressed my hands over the wound. You're not dying. Not now. He looked at Bean, eyes full of pain and love all at once. There's a file. In the briefcase, he said weakly. Give it to the police. It ends everything. I shook my head. We end it together. Sirens echoed in the distance, faint but coming closer. His hand found mine, gripping weakly. "If I don't make it, don't you dare," I interrupted. "You promised me once you'd stay." His eyes softened. And I meant it. His breath hitched, and I pressed my forehead against his, whispering, "You're coming home with me." The ambulance lights painted the night in flashes of red and white. I rode with him, holding his hand the whole way. The doctors worked fast. I sat outside the room, my clothes stained with blood and sea air. Hours passed. I counted every second. When the door finally opened, the surgeon said, "He's alive. For now, that's enough." I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't care about the for now. For now was hope, and hope was all I had left. Days blurred together in the hospital. Machines hummed softly beside him, their rhythm matching the fragile beat of his heart. I stayed by his side, reading him the letters I'd never sent, whispering stories about the life we could still have if he just opened his eyes. Sometimes his fingers moved slightly, as if reaching for me in a dream. "You said water remembers," I whispered one night. "So remember this, I'm not leaving you behind again." When he finally woke, the first thing he did was look for me. His voice was rough, barely there. "You came back." I smiled through tears. "You didn't make it easy." He tried to sit up, winced, then laughed softly. "You always find a way to ruin my dramatic exits." I leaned close. "You're not dying in my story." He looked at me for a long time, eyes glimmering like the sea we once stood by. "Then maybe it's time I let you write the ending." Outside the hospital window, the sun was rising, soft and gold. The light touched his face, and for the first time I saw peace there, fragile but real. I took his hand and said, "When this is over, when everything is finally quiet, let's go back to the sea." He smiled faintly. "Only if you promise not to leave this time." I squeezed his hand. "Not even if you ask me to." And for a moment, everything was still. The world, the noise, the fear. Just two people who had broken each other, holding on because somehow, through all the pain, they'd found a reason to keep going. But peace is never the end of our story. Sometimes it's just the pause before life tests how much love we're really made of. He was recovering slowly. The doctors said the bullet had missed his heart by an inch, but that inch was the space between goodbye and another chance. Every day he grew a little stronger, and every night I read to him until he fell asleep. The world outside went on. The police took the briefcase. The men who hunted him were arrested, and the story we had lived through became someone else's headline. But inside that hospital room, it was just us, suspended between past and future, between what we lost and what we still had left to save. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with that quiet smile of his. "What?" I'd ask. He'd shake his head. "I'm just trying to remember the exact moment I started falling in love with you." I laughed softly. "Probably the moment you realized I wasn't afraid of you." He smiled. "No, it was when you made pasta that night. Too salty. But you looked like you were trying to feed my soul." I rolled my eyes, but my heart melted all the same. Weeks later, when he was strong enough to leave, we went back to the little house by the sea. It looked exactly the same. The chipped paint, the wild grass, the sound of the waves waiting for us. "Feels like we never left," I said. "Maybe we didn't," he answered. "Maybe part of us stayed here, waiting for the rest to catch up." We spent our days in the kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. We walked on the sand, cooked simple meals, and listened to the sea whisper what words couldn't. For the first time in years, I felt safe. But peace has a way of warning you before it ends. One morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and found him standing by the window, staring at the horizon. His face was calm. Too calm. "What's wrong?" I asked. He turned slowly. "The police called," he said. "They want me to testify. Against everyone. It's the only way to finish this." My stomach sank. "That's dangerous." He nodded. "I know. But I can't keep running. Not if I want this to mean something." His eyes met mine. "We always said love should be brave. Maybe it's time to prove it." That night, we sat by the shore, wrapped in one blanket. The sky was heavy with stars. "If something happens," he began, but I pressed a finger to his lips. "Don't," I whispered. "You promised me we'd go back to the sea, remember?" He smiled faintly. Then I guess I have to keep that promise. The tide came in slowly, erasing our footprints in the sand. I leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat steady and fragile, like time itself was holding its breath. The next morning, he left before sunrise. I didn't stop him. Some battles must be fought alone, even when your heart goes with the one who fights them. He kissed my forehead, said, "Wait for me by the water," and walked away with the kind of courage that comes only from love. The sound of his footsteps faded long before the sound of the waves. Days passed. The world felt both full and empty at once. I waited by the sea like he asked, watching each sunset fall into the water, telling myself he'd return with the dawn, until the day the call came. A quiet voice on the phone. Words that felt like knives spoken softly. There was an accident. He didn't make it. The world fell silent. Even the sea seemed to stop breathing. I don't remember dropping the phone or falling to my knees, or how long I stayed there. Grief isn't loud. It's the absence of everything that used to make noise. The police said he saved lives that day. His testimony exposed everything, and the men who destroyed him were finally gone. He'd done what he said he would. He'd finished it. But I was left with the unfinished part of us. I buried his watch under the tree behind the house, the one he never managed to fix. I couldn't bear to keep it, but I couldn't let it go to strangers either. The tide came in, soft and endless, as I whispered, "You were never my stranger. You were my home." Months went by. My mother recovered fully. My brother started a family. Life bloomed in places I thought were dead. But every time I walked by the sea, I felt him there, in the rhythm of the waves, in the warmth of the sun, in the stillness before the wind. One evening I found a letter in the mailbox. No name, no address, just my initials. Inside, a single line in his handwriting. "If water remembers, then every wave that touches you is me, keeping my promise." I cried until the sky turned dark. But for the first time, the tears didn't taste like pain. They tasted like peace. I went to the water's edge, the wind brushing against my hair, and whispered, "I kept waiting, Adrian, not because I thought you'd come back, but because I never wanted to forget you." And as the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sea gold, I closed my eyes and smiled, 'cause love, I learned, doesn't end when the story does. It just changes form, from touch to memory to something eternal. Maybe that's what it means to marry a stranger. You don't save your family, you save yourself.